It is time for the 1-year update of my Subaru Crosstrek. What is going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things, and today I am finally bringing you guys a 1-year update of my Subaru Crosstrek. Now, if you guys have not seen the previous videos of this car, I will leave the main one right up here in the corner. That is my first initial 1-month review. And then if you want to check out my initial impressions when I picked up the car, as well as all of the different modifications that I did to my Crosstrek, I will leave those in the description down below. So now that I've owned this car for a little bit more than a year, I definitely have a better impression of it. There are some things that I like and some things that I don't like. I'm going to try to hit on all of those points, and then I also went back through some of the older videos and I'm going to answer a lot of the questions that people have been asking in those comments. So I guess I'll start with the negative side of things, because honestly there aren't a whole lot of things that I don't like about this car. The first negative thing that everyone says about the Crosstrek is that it is underpowered. Now, I knew that good and well going into the purchase. As you guys know, when I'm spending my money on things, I do a lot of research and I gather a lot of different information about making big purchases, especially when it comes to something like a car. So the Crosstrek has less than 200 horsepower, which definitely is not ideal, but for the reason that this car was designed, I think it is plenty of power. I'm just cruising on the highway right now, going about 60-65 miles an hour, and this thing is very comfortable. I didn't buy a Crosstrek to go fast, obviously. I bought this car as a daily driver, something where I can haul around all of my stuff in the back. There's just a lot of reasons why I went with the Crosstrek, just because it suits my lifestyle so well, and I explained a ton of that stuff in the previous videos, so definitely go check those out if you're curious as to why I went with the Crosstrek. So some people are still going to complain, saying, oh my god, it's so underpowered, I would never buy something like that. That's fine, the car is obviously not for you then. Would it be nice if it had 200 horsepower? Yeah, definitely. Would it be super awesome if Subaru offered this with a WRX type of engine? Hell yeah, sign me up for that. Subaru, when you make that, I'm gonna buy one. But for now, this thing works great for me, and I definitely do not have any kind of buyer's remorse. Like I said, the list of things that I do not like is fairly short on this thing, so let's talk about some of the other kind of nitty-gritty details. You'll have to excuse both the interior and exterior of my car for this video because I didn't clean it. I really don't clean this car a whole lot, to be honest with you. I bought it as basically a workhorse type of car, if you want to call it that. It's definitely not a beater, but it is more of a daily car than my STI, so I don't really clean this thing as often, and it is a Subaru, so the mud kind of looks good on it, I guess. So now, one of the complaints that I have, this is kind of really dumb and minor, but this AC vent right here, when you're sitting like this with your hands on the wheel, that vent is basically completely blocked by your hand no matter where it's at on the right side of the wheel. This vent is okay. I have a little pop socket thing on there so I can stick my phone on there if I need to, but I can adjust this thing, move it up, down, left, right, and it will get air to me if I need it. But this vent right here, I don't know, there's just something I don't really like about it. Your hand is always in the way, and if you point it up or to the right, it just kind of, I don't know, I feel like the air gets lost over here. Again, that is a super minor complaint, but it would be cool to see that, I don't know, pushed over a little bit. I don't know how you would actually do it though with the infotainment center here. So this is another thing that I don't really like about the car. I do like the screen and everything, and I do love Android Auto. When I have my phone plugged in here, I can see all of the information that is showing up on my phone. It shows me the weather in a place that I'm not even in right now. It shows me directions to get home. It'll show text messages. It shows a bunch of different things. Now, the one problem that I have with this is that sometimes it gets a little bit buggy. If I'm listening to music, whether it be on Spotify or on Google Play, if I'm also using my maps at the same time, sometimes the audio kind of gets, I don't know, janky. The music will be playing really loud and then I will turn it down so I can hear the map, but if the map is talking as you turn it, then it changes the volume of the maps, and then sometimes one of those audio levels gets locked. So a lot of the times when this is really annoying is when the music is very low and I go to turn it up, but then the map starts talking, the audio will then change the map volume, making it even louder, and then sometimes it will get stuck there. So the volume of the music is very low so I can barely hear it, and the map is blaringly loud, and when a turn comes, it kind of scares the shit out of you. Now, like I said, those are kind of super tiny, nitpicky type of details. And for the most part, I think that audio issue is actually on the Android Auto side, the actual app on my phone. It has not done that weird volume glitch thing in a while, so I think it seems to be okay now as they update the app. But since I'm getting into the details, I figured I might as well let you guys know. Other than that, I really do love the interior of the Crosstrek. I do like the base model seats and what they are made out of. I didn't want to go with the limited and get leather because, like I said, I'm going to be in and out of this thing all the time with gear and muddy stuff and things get wet. Fabric seats like this are much easier to take care of, and they should look newer longer because they're not going to wear like the leather does. There's also this nice carbon fiber wrap type of trim around here. I'm a big fan of carbon fiber, and I actually think it makes the interior look pretty damn good. There's plenty of space in the back, which I will hit on here in a little bit, but for now, I'm at my mountain land, so let's take this thing off-road a little bit. So as you guys can probably tell, the Crosstrek is pretty damn capable. Granted, the trails up here on the mountain land are pretty well taken care of. There is like a stream crossing and a bunch of puddles everywhere because it's been raining non-stop. But this thing wasn't designed to be a rock crawler. I added all of the stuff that gives it some better off-road ability. And from the factory, it comes pretty damn capable. But since I knew that I was going to be driving off-road pretty frequently in conditions like you just saw, I figured I might as well add the modifications that I did to the Crosstrek. Now, to go over a quick summary of everything that I do have done to this car, we can start with the lift kit. I have an 1.5 inch lift and a rear alignment kit from Subtle Solutions. All this really does is lift the stock suspension up a little bit, so you're not really gaining any performance out of it other than just ride height. I definitely have plenty of ground clearance for pretty much anywhere that I've ever taken this car. The wheels I'm running are the Method MR502 VT specs. They are a fairly standard 5x100 bolt pattern with a 15 offset. They are wrapped in BFG K02 tires, and the specs on the tires, which a lot of people ask, are 235 by 75 by 15. Now, this is a super common wheel and tire setup, especially for the Crosstreks. I know I was one of the first people to lift the newer body style of Crosstrek, and they were pretty common before I made all of those videos, and now they're even more common, which is awesome. I think it is a very good looking setup, and they are definitely very, very functional. Just like the 1 month update, I've driven this thing in very deep snow, and I honestly have never gotten stuck in the Crosstrek anywhere. I've actually tried to get this thing stuck, and we just simply didn't have enough snow for that to happen. I'm a huge fan of the all-wheel drive in Subarus, which is why I've owned Subarus for my past 3 cars now. And with that wheel and tire setup, I'm pretty confident that I can take it pretty much anywhere that I really need to go. And then as for the rest of the mods, I simply have window tint. I believe I went with 20% all around, so it is not super dark, but the interior is dark, so it makes it seem a little bit darker. I do have the Raceseng Tow Hooks in both the front and the rear. A lot of people ask me questions about those because they aren't technically listed on their site. I actually had to pair up a combination of STI tow hooks, and I left all of that information in the video on that, so if you want to check it out, click the link up there in the corner. The tow hooks are super high quality, and if I'm being honest, I've never used them and I probably never will. I'll be the first to admit that I put them on there for the aesthetics of it. I think it makes it look cool, but at the same time, they are very, very functional. I've seen those things tested to a great extent, and I'm pretty confident that if I ever get stuck or if I am driving somewhere and I see someone stuck, I will be able to pull them out, or hopefully someone would be able to pull me out. But like I said, I don't think that's getting stuck anytime soon. Speaking of things that I don't really use, the light bar that I spent so much time installing. Again, that is another thing that I put on there mainly for aesthetics, but I definitely use that more than the tow hooks. I've never used the tow hooks at all, but occasionally when it is snowing out, I will take the covers off of the hella lights and turn those on. The headlights and fog lights on the Crosstrek are typically enough for me, but especially if I'm up here in the mountain at night, or if there's just some really heavy dense snowfall, those 4 lights up front definitely light things up a lot better than just the headlights. Now, do I regret putting them on there? Not really. Like I said, I did it more for the looks. I originally was straying away from the LED type of lights, but I think LED lights like that, if they were around, I think they would look pretty cool. So am I going to upgrade that? Probably not, just because like I said, I don't use them that often. But the mod was actually relatively inexpensive. It wasn't that hard to wire up. So if that is something that you are interested in, I will leave a link to the video down in the description. I did a full install of the bar and the lights themselves. The only other thing that I can think of that I added to this car was the Rally Armor mud flaps. I do really like the way they look. They function for the most part. I mean, there is obviously going to be mud slung up the side of my car since the wheels stick out just a little bit, but those have definitely protected my paint because I've been in some really sloppy stuff before, kicking up rocks everywhere, and they definitely beat out the stock splash guards that came with the Crosstrek. Now, the combination of the mud flaps and the wheels and tires, that is where I actually run into probably the last complaint that I can think of. So another question that I get asked very commonly is, do these wheels and tires fit on a stock ride height Crosstrek? Would this exact setup fit on a Crosstrek without that 1.5-inch lift? I simply cannot answer that for sure. I would like to say yes, I believe there is enough room in there for the wheels to actually fit inside of the well. But if you watch the video of me lifting this Crosstrek, you will also know that I put the wheels and tires on at the same time. So would this exact setup work on your stock height Crosstrek? I don't know. I don't want to be the person to tell you yes and then have it not work for you. I will tell you, however, that my last complaint though comes from rubbing issues between the wheel and tire setup and these Rally Armor mud flaps. As you guys can see here, I have the wheel turned at maybe about 20 degrees. This is probably the furthest the tire will stick into the wheel well, and as you can see, it is super close to rubbing in there. For the most part, average driving, it is completely unaffected. I really don't hear anything and I don't notice any rubbing issues. But that is not quite the case with 2 different scenarios. One, if I am driving at a decent speed and I am braking while in a turn. This happens pretty frequently if I realize that I'm going to miss a turn. I will brake, which loads the front suspension of the car, and then I will turn my wheel at the same time, so that kind of gets rid of this little bit of clearance that I have in here, and it makes an awful noise because these big treads are obviously ripping on the mud flap in here. Now, it hasn't ripped anything off. I've been driving like this for a long time. Well, not a long time, about a year. And so far, everything has held up. I actually bent the bracket in the back of the mud flap to kind of pull it out of the way as far as possible. But without doing some more extreme type of modification, I don't think I will be able to get that to stop rubbing. Another scenario when this happens, and probably most commonly, is when I am backing up and I have the wheel turned to about a 50% lock. So I'm right in between the wheel being straight and the wheel being at 100% lock. As I am backing up, this thing will definitely catch on this mud flap, and again, it makes that terrible noise. To film all of that driving around up here, I obviously had to go forward and reverse a lot in this thing. So here in this clip, you may be able to hear that noise. Oh, listen to that. And then going forward, if I'm braking, it's not as bad going forward. So as you guys can hear, not the greatest sounding thing in the world. I've done basically as much as I can to try to get rid of it. I even cut the inside of the mud flap. I bent back the bracket. I really tried to get as much material out of the way as possible while still leaving them functional. And really the only fix that I have found would be to just put the stock splash guards back on. Now, like I said, I have been driving the Crosstrek with this issue for a little bit over a year now, so I'm pretty much used to it. If I'm backing up in reverse, I just won't keep the wheel at 50% lock. I'll either turn it way past that to 100, or I'll just take it easy and go about 20%. It really only rubs right when I'm in that sweet spot of like right in the middle. But yeah, other than that, it doesn't bother me enough to actually go out and change it and put the stock splash guards back on. So I'm living with it. That is basically the only other complaint that I can really think about this car. I do have one more quick thing to show you guys before I head out of the mountain land, and that would just be simply the space that this thing offers. There is plenty of room inside here to fit a 6-foot passenger behind a 6-foot driver. The materials are all the same, and I throw a lot of dirty stuff back here, and as you can see, it's still relatively clean. Every once in a while I will vacuum it out. I do have the all-weather mats all throughout the car, but there is definitely a lot of room, and these seats do fold down. Back here I have all my steel targets, so let's go around. I also have one of these kind of privacy protector things up here. It's just like a sunshade, but it does line up perfectly with the back hatch here, so no one can actually see what you have back here. This thing also pops out very easily as well, but I basically leave it in all the time because I leave stuff in here, like my targets. Now, just to explain how much room is actually in here, every year I go on an annual camping trip for about 3 or 4 days. For the most part, we would pack up our gear in a car or a truck, head up to the mountains, and then I would sleep in a tent or a hammock. This past summer, I actually slept in the back of my Crosstrek. I found that there was just enough room to fit everything that I need, as well as blow up a twin mattress. If you fold both of the back seats down and then push either the driver's side or the passenger side seat all the way forward, you can actually fit a blow-up mattress in here. Now, I'm not saying that I will ever do this, although it would be very cool, but you could technically like travel around and live out of this thing if you really wanted to. But that also leads me into some other topics of discussion and some questions that you guys have asked me, but let me head out of the mountain before I answer those. Alright guys, back on the road now, and this thing is very smooth on the road as well. That's another thing that I wanted to talk about. Right now I have just over 15,000 miles on the Crosstrek in the past like year and month or two, and I've taken this thing all over the East Coast. I've driven all the way down to Miami and back. I've driven up north all the way to like Boston and areas like that. I've driven all the way to Nashville and back, and I really have taken this car pretty damn far in the past year. Comfort-wise, it is great for me. I'm about 5'10", so not the tallest guy ever, but there is plenty of room here and the seat can go back much further. Now, one of the questions that I have been asked on the previous video was, why the Crosstrek? Why not a Forester or an Outback? And the simple reason for that was basically the price. Crosstreks are relatively cheap, especially if you were going with one of the lesser models like myself. The Foresters and Outbacks are definitely bigger and roomier and have more powerful engines for the most part, but the Crosstrek just fit my needs very well. As you guys probably know, I do have a 2015 STI, so that is basically like my fun car. So again, the somewhat lacking power of the Crosstrek never really bothered me, and as far as room goes, this thing has plenty of room for me. I moved my entire life from up here in the Northeast all the way down to southern Florida, lived there for 6 months, and then packed everything back up into my Crosstrek and drove back here. That is everything that I had with me, an entire apartment full of stuff. So those are just a few of the reasons why I went with the Crosstrek over some other options. And then another question that a lot of people ask me is why I went with the CVT over a 6-speed manual. There's actually a few reasons for that, one being that this was bought as a daily driver. I knew I was going to be in traffic a lot, I was commuting a lot on the highway, and that is kind of a pain in the if you're in stop-and-go traffic when you're driving a manual transmission. Yes, there have been some reports in the past of issues with the CVT. However, this thing is backed for 100,000 miles, so I don't think I should be seeing any issues anytime soon. At least hopefully not. Another reason why I went with the automatic is because this does get better gas mileage than a stick shift would. I believe a manual transmission Crosstrek gets between 23 and 29, both city and highway, whereas this Crosstrek with the CVT should get between 27 and 33 on the highway. Speaking of that, we might as well talk about the MPGs and what I am actually getting currently. If you watch my 1-month update, it really hasn't changed a whole lot since then. As you can see, even with driving up in the mountains and stopping and going back and forth filming all of this video, I'm still getting about 24 miles per gallon, which is not too shabby. And then if you do the conversion for my wheels and tires, I'm actually getting a little bit more than that. If you want to know more information on how I did that, you can check out the 1-month review. I think on average I'm getting between 26 and 28 miles per gallon with some pretty average driving, that is driving up in the mountains, some city or town driving, and then of course some highway trips. I believe when I was doing some of those longer road trips like to Florida and Tennessee, I was actually getting somewhere close to like 32, 33 33. I've also read some comments on the previous videos of people saying, yo, how do you get that kind of gas mileage on your Crosstrek? Mine comes nowhere close to that. And to answer your question, I have no idea. I guess I'm just a slow driver, but it is in their advertised range, so that seems to be pretty normal. Maybe if you aren't getting that type of mileage, maybe you have a lead foot or something, I don't know. I mean, I drive my car, I wouldn't say aggressively, but I definitely like to have fun when I drive sometimes, and I still get pretty good gas mileage. I don't know. I'm happy with it, that's for sure. And that is even when calculating the mileage from how much I'm filling up and then what the odometer is actually showing. So the gas mileage is great, the Crosstrek fits my lifestyle very well, and for the 1-year update, I am very, very happy with it. Again, if you guys want to see any of the previous videos of the modifications that I did to it, or you want to know more about the specs on my wheels and tires, things like that, I will leave links and all of that information in the description down below. Now, hopefully I covered everything that you guys wanted to know, but I'm sure there are still some people out there with some questions, so if you have anything that you want to know that I did not cover in this video, let me know in the comments down below and I will try to answer them as best as possible. I hope you guys enjoyed this 1-year Crosstrek update, and if you did, I would appreciate if you slap a like on it, and if you are new to this channel, consider clicking subscribe because I make new videos every week. That is going to be all for today, so as always, thank you guys for watching, and I will talk to you in the next one.